I won't be doing the Georgia Tech presentation, but that would be fun.
You do better than that.
All right. So my name is Jennifer Chesney. I'm here proudly representing the nation of Canada and University of Alberta and the province of Alberta. I am the Associate Vice President of University Digital Strategy, the first unit of its kind in Canada. The University of Alberta, for those of you who may not know, is a large university. We are one of the top 5 research universities in Canada. We have an approximate enrollment of 39,000, another 14,000 who are faculty of extension. Dino 101 has been a tremendous success for us on the Coursera platform, and I'll be talking about that in detail. We offered it in 3 variants. It's an introduction to paleobiology, and what we're really doing is teaching the scientific method globally through the venue of the dinosaur. So a culturally appealing method of reaching people from all over the world. At the same time, we also taught this to 800 of our own students online and 50 in a blended version that was capped specifically with our professor of paleontology, Dr. Phil Curry. So there are many marketing strategies around MOOC. Today we're focusing on ROI and results, but I did want to quickly touch on reputation and reach in my 5 minutes. I do have a timer on, so hopefully I'll stick with that. There is no ROI without engagement. So before you talk about what kind of monetization you can do, you must make a commitment towards engagement for the students that are taking your course. What we have done is something different that we are very eager to share with all members here because, frankly, most of the MOOCs out there are poor quality from the student's perspective. Many of the faculty think they're fantastic quality, but they are not engaging our students. And we see that in some of the reported average completion rates of 5%. We'll show you a very different result that we achieved through Dino 101. Primarily because we focused not just on the tip of the iceberg, the pedagogy, which all our professors know well, as yours do, but also the very important parts of formative, summative, and online university exams, a tool that we built, online consumption and behavior strategy, gamification, earned and viral media strategy, and a high-quality filming and editing production value to create that higher standard of rigorous university MOOC. This is it in a nutshell. I believe that if all universities were to do the same, we would have a much higher quality course product out there for learners around the world. It is handcrafted. It is hard work. But at the same time, it involves all the best brains at your university, your graduate students in industrial design, in computing science, your digital strategy groups, your analytics groups, marketing, PR, communications, the professors for the subject matter expertise that you are providing to the world. So what were our results? Very briefly, we had 77% of our students were active participants, which is a new high in the reported results. Only 23% registered dropout. 26% watched all 43 lectures. 17% completed all chapter quizzes. 16% with an 80% or better mark. So that is a dramatically different set of metrics than the 5% average completion rate we are seeing. Very important to us was gender equity in the MOOC. We achieved the highest percentage reported so far for a general science course at 55% female participation. 95% said that they agreed or strongly agreed that they would recommend the course to a friend. And as you see, we are building our pipeline for prospective undergraduate and graduate students. So MOOC version 2.0 does give you positive ROI, and we will be discussing that in detail in our questions. But I don't want to lose sight in this very dry and dollar-focused discussion we will have of the human element of why we do this. These are some of the faces of the students who took Dino 101 from all over the world, of all different kinds, working in the activities that were assigned to them, being out in the museums, sketching, working at home. We had teams of grandparents taking this with their grandchildren. We had students taking the course together via Skype and sharing the work as they went together. And through the interactive learning objects that we built, we had teachers who were able to use their touch screens in the elementary schools to play with the puzzles with even the K through 12 kids. So MOOC version 2.0 also equals positive JOY, as you can see here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. We'll get that scary beast off, and I'll ask Nadav Stark from Tel Aviv to follow Jennifer.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Get the timer on. So, my name is Nadav Stark. I work for Tel Aviv University. Can we get this going? Yes. And I am the director of online learning. Is this going to work? For the Business Development Corporation. So, in general, these are kind of the 2 points that I'm going to try and kind of discuss in my 5 minutes. So, generally about the Business Development Corporation, I think we have our CEO here. Yes, there. Okay. So we are a subsidiary, and this is our mandate, right? So we are the non-tech transfer, non-IP related or direct IP related corporation of the university, which puts us in a different vantage point or viewpoint, I guess, vis-a-vis MOOCs and monetization of MOOCs. We started out a year ago with the endeavor of MOOCs. We have 2 that have already ran and 1 that is currently running on the emergence of the modern Middle East. But we're not going to talk about them. We're going to talk about the potential monetization or principles that we see to kind of preview what will hopefully be the conversation afterwards as to how we think the potential business models could work. So the general business ideas that we have regarding MOOCs are as following. First of all, they need to generate value for the students and for the school. That's maybe something that you don't think of, but it is something, or you don't. It's maybe accepted as like this a precondition, but for us it is very important. We want to make it sustainable, and we're kind of going to go into that, and we want a diversified portfolio of generated incomes. Okay, so we want to diversify the stream from different places. So when we say sustainable, right, MOOCs started here 2.5 years ago, approximately, where we all went in because we were very curious about it. We were there, we had to be there. It had a high cost, it is very time consuming. It did raise the reputation of the universities, had a lot of help in learning about learning. But the question is where we're going to go from here on. Where the potential, how do we all not just generate 2 or 3 or 5 MOOCs a year, but how do we move on to 60 MOOCs a year, if at all? So that's where we find it a very basic need for making this sustainable, for making this bring in more funds than we actually spend on it. So obviously new MOOCs, but the idea of sustainability is very, very important for us in the way that we think about MOOCs. So diversity. This is Malcolm Gladwell, and I'm going to use 2 seconds or half a minute of your time explaining a TED Talk about spaghetti sauce. Anybody seen it here in the house? Yes? 1 person. You should all go and see this. It's very insightful and probably useful in many ways. I've found myself returning to this and thinking about it. But he explains in many ways, how this food technician or food psychophysicist influenced the food industry in the United States. And he does this through the idea of spaghetti sauce. But this psychophysicist named Howard Moskowitz, I think was the name, went on and was asked by Pepsi to find the exact right level of aspartame or diet drink level for the Diet Pepsi when Diet Pepsi came out. And he had this really strong insight where he said they were asking the wrong questions, they were looking for the perfect Pepsi, and they should have been looking for the perfect Pepsis. You might ask how this has anything to do with business models. So when we say diversity, we have a bunch of different ideas for business models. And I should apologize to the Coursera people that are sitting in front in saying that I do not believe that Signature Track is going to be the one silver bullet that is going to land that for us, the revenue for us. And I'm 5 minutes over. So we should be looking at a bunch of different models. These are some of the models that we have in just a general statement or a general kind of, I'd be glad to talk about them more later. But again, we should be looking at many business models, and I would kind of want to ask you guys later what you've tried and has worked for you. So, concludes my remarks.
I didn't know my timer was going to go off when you said that.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael McCracken. I'm the Director of Online Course Development and Innovation for what we call the Center for 21st Century Universities at Georgia Tech. We're essentially a think tank or an innovation center that the provost established about 2 years ago for coming up with innovative ways of approaching the education of students at Georgia Tech to not write policy, but to experiment and innovate in different ways and then see if that transfers to the faculty. So obviously MOOCs is one of the areas that we've worked in, and that's what I've been involved with since July of 2012. We were the fifth, if you want to call it that, member of the partnership team with Coursera. We've done about, depending upon how you count, about 30 MOOCs. We'll have another 10 this year, and our registration as of the end of February is about 600,000 students. Everybody laughs, but that's the only number that we can easily collect to talk about kind of the size of our courses all over the place and doing different things. Boom. So, if you look at the roadmap, if you look at the roadmap of MOOCs, started out with this kind of altruistic, we're going to save the world, educate the world model, which is, to me, is quickly evolving into different ways. At Georgia Tech, we look at this as content that we can use to improve the education of our students. Not isolating ourselves from the open view of MOOCs that should be out there. We still support that, but we're trying to see how we can use this technology and the content to help educate our students. As of now, with a great deal of success, as we're using them in blended and flipped classrooms in many instances at Georgia Tech. And so we moved from kind of experimenting in higher ed to improving student learning and then improving student learning of students who may come to your university. So if you think about moving MOOCs into the K-12 arena or using them as transitions, a lot of talk about replacing AP exams with college courses, and so they can get college credit, real college credit for a real course. We've run some experiments with a couple of schools in Atlanta, high schools, very successful experiments, using some of our physics MOOCs to be able to have these students get credit for Georgia Tech courses and at the same time get credit at their high school. From a revenue standpoint, my next slide, I'm not going to give that one away. But from a revenue standpoint, what we're doing is we're using donor money for all of our development costs. We're a state university. We don't have the funds available to us to support development of MOOCs from what you might call state or tuition money. So we have to rely on donor funds. We expect that's going to continue for quite some time. But we also look at it as a standpoint of once the content is developed, that's a fixed cost, with the sustaining or recurring costs being equal to or less than what our recurring costs would be for normal courses. So if I'm seeing improvement in learning or education of our students at a net zero increase in cost, a lot of times it's those smaller classrooms or faculty-student ratios or more TAs or these kind of things. But if I can use the same cost model that I have now for current brick and mortar face-to-face classes and sustain that, then it's a win. And our administration is looking at that as, this is actually a win for no increased cost in our delivery or our production or teaching costs and improve our learning. And we're finding improved student learning by using some of these techniques. So this is a win as far as we're concerned. And like I said, the administration is accepting that as improvement at no increased cost. And it's always, you hear about education all the time. More money, more money, more money. Well, this is a case where maybe it's not more money. Maybe, in fact, we use technology to improve what it is we're doing, and it's a win for everybody. If we then go to the other extreme of just replacing a class with a MOOC, obviously there's significant cost savings. We haven't really gone in that direction. We will probably experiment with that some for ourselves. So we can't commit public funds, and we're moving in many directions to see how this stuff fits together. Obviously, but we have PhD level MOOCs for very small audiences in chaos theory all the way down to Physics 1, which is a freshman level course. And we also working with the University System of Georgia. It's a state university system, about 31 universities that are associated with it. And we are working with them and actually replacing, I don't know if that's too strong a word, but let's say replacing their first 2 years of core courses that are common across all these 31 universities with MOOC versions of those courses. That's an experiment that's going on right now. We have a pre-calculus course that we've done with Coursera and some other technological partners, and we're going to continue that process of developing those courses. And so we're advisors and experts, I guess, with the state system, and it's working out pretty good. And we're going to continue pursuing funding. I don't believe that Coursera, is going to solve my revenue problems. Hopefully they'll solve their revenue problems and we'll get some benefit from that. But I don't expect the revenues that we'll ever gain from the Coursera model as it currently exists. It'll probably evolve. You're probably familiar with our online master's degree in computer science, $7,000 for a master's degree on the Udacity platform. That's a revenue generation process. So if we get into more what you might call degrees or certificates or strings or whatever you want to call them, with some associated costs, that might generate revenue that will help us do that as well. So I think that's it. I'm done. Let's see, put the exit and close that. I'm supposed to do my homework, do my job here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks panel. I just want to introduce one other person to this session who's from Coursera fairly recently, one of the faces that you saw yesterday at the early session, Tom Willerer, who's here. And Tom, if you want to respond to one or two of the comments that were made at this point.
Mike was generous enough to give me a microphone, but not let me sit up on the table. So I'll take the mic and the nose. Thank you. There are, I'd say, two things. So one, I think we've seen some examples of how MOOCs already are sustainable for universities. One is on the reach. So Alberta has a nice poster outside that's talking about the earned media that they've been able to achieve from their Dino 101 classes and other classes. And it's over $200,000 that they've been able to achieve from that. That's one model for how this is sustainable. Berkeley College of Music has talked about how these are a feeder program for their online master's degrees and their online programs. That's another model. Rice, in the opening remarks, talked about how a third of their students into one of their graduate programs were coming from Coursera. These are ways in which Coursera is providing real value and sustainable for some of our current partners. On the notion of verified certificates and whether or not that's a large market, one thing that gives us confidence in that is that there are 1.4 billion people with internet access between the ages of 15 to 54. The vast majority of them not in any market where they could or have the financial abilities to come to one of your great institutions. But these people want an education that's going to prove value to them. And one way for that to prove value for them is by getting a certificate. So you can do math off of 1.4 billion that becomes very large, even at $50 per certificate, that I think really could be over the long term a nice, large, sustainable market for all of us. So that's my advice.
All right. Thank you, Tom, and we'll bring you back into the conversation, but still not on this stage, and just keep down there for now, if that's all right. You're only Vice President.
I appreciate my place.
All right. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're now going to go into a question-answer session where I'll ask the panelists some a little bit rehearsed questions, just to tease out one or two of these key points. And I'll try to keep them fairly active on these questions so that we've got plenty of time for you to engage with them afterwards. So, Mike, we're going to start off with you. You mentioned in your presentation one or two of the pressures and drivers for Georgia Tech. Just wanted to know why you feel it's critical for your institution to actually make MOOCs sustainable.
That's a good question. Well, we believe that the technology associated with the MOOC platforms is important to the future of educating our students. It's just as simple as that. We think, as I say, I'm starting to laugh because he has the nose on, that we are looking at this as an evolution of higher ed that is just beginning, maybe over the last few years, and we don't know where it's going to go. But with that, we're going to not watch, not follow, but lead and experiment. A year from now, it may be completely different than what we're doing today. A year from now, Coursera may look completely different than what it does today. Excuse me. But sustaining this investment, we've done the experiment. We've actually decided this is no longer an experiment. I think, again, I'll bring up the online master's program. That tells me it's an indication that this is not an experiment anymore. We've bet a huge amount of money on that program and made it into a degree program, not just a course that's out there for somebody to do something with. So sustaining this is critical, as far as we're concerned, to the future of higher ed at Georgia Tech, as well as higher ed throughout the world. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the K through 12 process. I think there's going to be a big change in that arena, maybe a bigger change in that arena than we see in higher ed. And it's just starting to get going.
Okay, Jennifer, next question for you. What revenue models have you been using to make your MOOCs sustainable? Tom touched on one or two, I think.
Yes. So we have 8 revenue models we're using for Dino 101. 2 are related to tuition. We have a new on-campus course offered in the capped blended format for 50 students at a full tuition credit. Number 2, new on-campus course offered in online format for 800 plus students and growing per term at half price full tuition credit, although we may move back up. We are also very affiliated to the government of Alberta, so in some cases we have to adjust our pricing model based on what the government tells us to do. Number 3, obviously the Coursera signature track. We decided to go to $69 on those signature track certifications, and we're not coming down. We don't see any reason to price yourself down before you've made a market. Number 4, UAlberta certification of accomplishment. We are the first university to do this with Coursera. So this is given to Coursera students, not University of Alberta students, who paid to take the UAlberta midterm and final exams. So this is very new. But honestly, we saw that the Coursera platform was not allowing us the testing rigor that we needed to feel was university level. So at the University of Alberta, we created a very flexible HTML5, for those of you that are techies in the room, online testing tool. And that allows Coursera students, if they wish to pay us for it, to take the same midterm and final exams that the University of Alberta students are taking on campus. We've had, for the 2 issues of the Dino that we've taken, 18 students, Coursera students so far, who have decided to do that. And they have received a certification of accomplishment from the University of Alberta. Should any of those 18 show up on our doorstep at the Faculty of Science, which is the faculty that sponsored this particular MOOC, we will, again, review the credential, and they will receive the 3-course credit for that. Now, that may be different for many of you because we're up in Edmonton, Alberta. We don't expect many of them to show up on our doorstep, but they may. And we will honor that because we put our name behind it. It is university credit. Number 5, a Cafe Press print-on-demand store. So we commissioned the paleo artist who produced the art, some of which you see outside on the poster. And obviously, most of that goes to Cafe Press, but we get our little cut on top of it. We sell t-shirts, mugs, tchotchkes. We've actually sold quite a bit through that store. Again, that will be subject matter dependent for any of you. Number 6, a Fine Art America store. That is also a print-on-demand store. In that case, they sell high-quality art prints, various types of paper that you can get it printed on. We just opened that up and have had sales and revenue already. Number 7, with our Office of Advancement, we created a specific paleo program for donations, and the capability is set up. It encourages online donations from Dino 101 students and other interested people who want to support paleo specifically online, and we have seen revenues come in through that model. And number 8, this is a bit more complex, so I'll read it to you. I can answer questions on it. A third-party university/high school model, where a third party can pay per student to us at the University of Alberta for the creation, grading, and support of online exams for the Dino 101 course at their institution, okay? Where the third party charges students their institution's normal fees, runs the course through their own registrar system, chooses if they want to offer the course in online only or blended format to their students, okay? Because you can't touch other universities' antiquated registration systems. There's dead people in there, so don't try. Believe me, I have. And you don't want to touch what their pricing model is. In Canada, we offer a tremendous value for our higher education compared to the United States. We know that if a university in the United States who could not offer paleo wanted to offer a paleo course, that they can pay the University of Alberta a certain amount per student, but to their own student, they'll charge whatever their regular fee is. And they keep all that top up. So you can think of it as a way of they're able to provide a very expensive general science elective paleontology at no additional cost to them other than the cost to us who administer and grade the exams for them and pass it back. So that's a new system that we've just developed, and we're working within our own Campus Alberta framework. So those are the other institutions in Alberta. But we also have that open for any university around the world who would like to do that with us. So our MOOCs in development will use some of these models, but there's also additional models that we are developing that are not used in Dino 101 specific to them. One of the ones that I've been pushing Coursera on, and I hope they can provide this to us all in the future, is a microtransaction platform. So we have wonderful materials, additional lessons, additional interactive learning objects, pieces of text, pictures, apps, things of that nature. And students will pay 99 cents, $1.99 for them. You don't make it part of the course. You don't say you have to get this to take the course. Not at all. This is additional material, but you will find fan bases around your courses who will want that. We need to be able to monetize that. Now, I can go and set this all up on Google Play and the Apple Store myself through the University of Alberta, but wouldn't it be nice if there was that type of marketplace within the Coursera framework itself? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. That's probably given you plenty of food for thought in the audience. Nadav, what kind of revenue models do you Sure.
Jennifer, on your first two, when you said for the 50 plus students you gave them full tuition credit and for the 800 half?
Yes.
I didn't understand. When you said full credit, they're paying the full tuition?
Yes, they're taking a normal course at the university with the professor. The online materials work for them functionally like a textbook, right? It's just all online. It's the Dyno 101 course. But they are in the classroom with Dr. Phil Curry. They're going on field trips to the bone beds and unearthing fossils together. So that's why it's capped. It's highly personalized. Excuse me. And that's our regular tuition credit. They're not paying more tuition than they would normally. So we didn't go to like a fee index higher or anything like that.
Or less. They're not paying less.
No, not for them. That's the special experience, and it's the cost of the professor.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Nadav, if I could turn to you in Tel Aviv, what kind of future revenue models do you envisage?
Well, a lot of them are the ones that Jennifer discussed, but I'm just gonna. We had a similar model to you guys, except with we had 150 students. Actually, maybe we'll start with the story of how this came to be. So we came up with our two courses, and then we had presented this to a forum in the university, of which the head of the School of Education said, wow, you created really good courses. What about our students? At which point we said, well, that's not a bad idea. Would you be, would this be equivalent to credit? We created it as such, but would you guys recognize it? And they said that they would, and through a very fast, surprisingly fast process within the university, they recognized our own courses under a certain set of conditions. So the students had to come in to take the final exam on campus. So it wouldn't be through the internet. It was a harder final exam than the regular students had. And we had tracked their, and this is the beauty with Coursera versus other learning management systems, and I know they don't like to be referred to as a learning management system, but they are a very good one. So you can track the advancement of the students throughout the semester. So essentially the students, we had 150 students, take the course, not show up in class, and then come take the final exam. The students enjoyed it very much. We actually got, so it was 150 students in two courses. Now we have 177, which is it's a general elective course. So of that type, it is the highest possible, or the highest in the in that certain unit that it is given in, and students are very happy with it. And obviously, there's a monetization model, or immediate monetization model for the university within that. So if each credit point costs a certain amount, the students aren't paying less tuition. So it makes a lot of financial sense to take that and put it into the introductory courses, as what we're looking at. There are, again, other models that you mentioned, the premium services, right? Premium content, which is things that students can buy after, complementary content. Yep. So if you were to sell a geological, what's it called, like the little pick thingies, right? Right? Students, as a memory of them taking the course, right? They would want something, to remember the course by. It's something that can...
We actually have that. We have Dyno 101 wallpapers optimized for any kind of device, and that's from the commissioned art. And we've had hundreds of downloads on those. They're beautiful. You should all download them. They're free. It's free.
But we're talking about monetization, right?
I'll get them later.
Okay. Anyway, so the idea is, again, you can offer, there's a lot of services around, and the idea of diversity, which is kind of why I spent that time, is to say that it's going to be $2,000 from here, $2,000 from here, $3,000 from there, $5,000 from signature track maybe, right? But it's going to be like this ecosystem of, or not ecosystem, just like a spectrum of different monetization models where different people pay for different things. So if I have a friend that actually lives here and took one of our courses, and she doesn't need the certificate, she's not interested in the certificate, but she would very much like to donate after. Okay, she said that university invested money, so you called it a donation. The model would be a tip jar model, right? If you're looking at it, that is essentially what it is. I know Coursera's looked at pay as you want or pay as you wish, right? Depending on how you call it, which is essentially a different model where you can, in the beginning, after they've paid for signature track, say, do you want to pay a certain amount? You don't have to, but give them that option. I think we'd be surprised at what comes in. It doesn't cost much to create the option, in the sense of alternative costs, maybe, but it needs to be looked into.
Okay, thank you, Nadam.
Again, one specific question. On the course with the 150 to 177 students?
No, there were two.
Okay, well, the one where they take the MOOC and they come in physically for the exam.
Yes.
Are they getting the same number of credits as the students who would have taken the whole course?
Exact amount of credits. It's the exact course. Again, the reason why we did this is because the professor said we've actually given a better course here. Right? These are the courses where, the professor has given it for 20 years. It's a knowledge transfer course. Not all of them are like that, but for a very certain type of course, that is very good. Because if you have 200 people in a class, right, you're not going to speak to each one of them. You're not going to really be able to engage with them actively. So I think for them, they said, we could do this, and then we could do a flipped model. We could, at professor's time, by the way, I've said this to some of the people here, it's our most valuable resource. So if we can clear them up to do research, we're a research university, that's worth money. They can write grants, they can do research, they can do the stuff they want to do, and we're there to help them do that. Another fast comment, I think it's not by coincidence that all of us are in public universities in different countries, just because of the fact that we're not a private university that can afford to put endless amounts of money with in experiments on MOOCs, and we have this need for monetization models.
Okay, thank you, Nadav. I'm going to move now to Mike. And you mentioned earlier, Mike, about Georgia Tech having recently enrolled students on the online master's degree in partnership with Udacity. And I just wondered if you see any relationship with free MOOCs and students signing up for the full fee paying course.
Well, yeah, it has to do with certification and the quality of the certification. So in today's world, a degree or equivalent is what employers are looking for. That seems to be the golden grail that is required by industry to be able to be employed. That's going to change. I'm sure it's going to change. We're going to see more and more of certificates and competency-based assessments and portfolios that people generate that will probably change that model. I gave a talk a while back at a conference, I can't remember where it was, and we talked about industrial needs and desires. And I said, the HR people who typically manage the hiring processes use a simple approach to deciding on whether or not somebody gets through the door to be interviewed. And quite often it has to do with degree and school you went to, at least in the US, and your grade point average. And that's the critical thing. Or in my world, can you program in Java or Python or something like that? So the critical thing about this certification process is it's going to continue. So that's why we have the online master's degree. What's surprising about that is the quality of the students that applied to the program that we rejected are better than the students that we accept in our normal master's program. And the students that we accept in our normal master's program are way up there. But these guys were another step beyond what we normally see. So we think there is a reason for people doing that. The question is whether or not they will actually finish the degree or just take some of the courses. We won't know that for a few years, but they are after that certification and the Georgia Tech name. And so there's some merit to that.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mike. Now over to you again, Jennifer. Slightly different tack on this one. How would you quantify the marketing brand awareness benefit of a successful MOOC?
Thank you. So we probably have this strange, I guess, award of saying that we really created the first MOOC marketing framework. And it created tremendous buzz, not just in higher ed, but also from advertising agencies around the world, because obviously we pretty much created a new vertical. I'm going to take you through it pretty succinctly. Again, can answer any questions afterwards. So the MOOC course marketing framework consists of 3 key components: search marketing, social media activation, and earned viral media. The 3 goals of the marketing approach were to drive course registrations, ROI that robustly surpassed the marketing costs spent, and ROI break-even or surpassing total cost of course when estimated marketing value is added to net benefit cost position. How do you quantify? For search marketing, we had a target of 50% takeover of first page of google.com, not CA, which is totally easy to win, on key term in all result channels. We achieved over 80%. And for paid search, amount of traffic to the Coursera Dyno 101 page, we didn't have a target because we'd never done it before. Our actual was 44%. In social media activation, we quantify that by using a value derived from the company called Social Chorus. Some of you may know that are in marketing science, that estimates the values of social media properties and actions and estimates a dollar value. It's a very important piece of the math. In earned media, we estimated the value of those earned media sources. So we had earned media from BBC, New York Daily News, Wired UK, the Huffington Post, and other major syndicates in Canada, in the US, and in the UK, and in Australia. For those, we estimated the value by comparing our marketing budget to the cost of buying cost per 1,000 impressions, that's CPM, advertising on those sites. We used a conservative $18 to CPM calculation. Obviously, if you move that number down or up, you can derive a higher or lesser marketing value. We had 12 digital distribution channels that we utilized in this framework. The 12 were our own university Dyno 101 page. Again, all of this is to drive course registrations. That's the main conversion that you want here. The Coursera's Dyno 1 webpage. We created 12 Mythbuster videos about common myths that humanity has about dinosaurs. We created, with an agency, the Evolution Bureau in San Francisco, Jurassic George webisodes of very, very entertaining people and a bitter kind of Barney type of dinosaur who basically debunked other types of myths around dinosaurs and ate someone at the end of each webisode. Again, this was a way to engage students who were not, male, well-educated, already got a master's anyway. Like, I'm not interested in those people. They're doing their own thing. I am interested in those people. Dyno 101 course lecture videos was another one of our channels. Google AdWords was a channel. Earned Media was a channel. Blog Post was a channel. And Facebook, where we had UAlberta and Dyno 101 accounts going, was also a big channel. University of Alberta is very active in social media in general throughout our digital strategy. So for the 10 channels, we have actual impression numbers. For earned media, we have a conservative impression number estimated. For the 19 blogs, we also received coverage on. Unfortunately, we do not have impressions data. There is not a central source for that from blogs. The marketing budget return on investment is 12 million plus impressions of varying lengths of time, because obviously some of them were interacting with material for well over 5 to 10 minutes. at the cost of 1 cent per impression. So that's how you quantify the marketing and brand awareness benefit of a successful MOOC.
Tom, you have a quick question? Yeah, I just wanted to say that I love that, and I think that that's a fantastic way to look at this. The other point that's not mentioned in there is the engagement you got with actual students on the course material.
Yes.
And the benefits that you got from them as well. That's all the things you mentioned are kind of derivative off of that.
Yes, so that's why I showed actually humans in the first part of my presentation, because I knew that what I was going to be answering here is the kind of nuts and bolts money pieces of this. But yes, the primary reason that we are doing this at all is that deeper engagement. We want to have the highest completion rates per MOOC of any other MOOC out there, and we will continue to strive for that as our key metric. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. We'll continue on with Nadav. Question for you is to ask whether at Tel Aviv you're thinking more strategically in terms of the subject of MOOCs that you're going to develop in terms of some of the revenue models that you've mentioned.
So yes. Also, I think Tom also meant to ask Jennifer for a seminar, a webinar for the other partners once this is over, but seem to have forgotten. Volunteering you here shamelessly. Anyway, yes, we are thinking very strategically about what way we choose our courses, and I would argue that I think most of you do as well. So you want, obviously, a course that you have some sort of comparative advantage in with professor, with subject, but also there was a great workshop yesterday on penetration to different markets led by Coursera's Yin Lu, where she gave very interesting data, which I think is relevant here. So apparently in Mexico, most MOOCs that are taken are in entrepreneurship or business. In India, a lot of programming MOOCs. So I think universities are going to have to look and see, strategically, where do we want to penetrate? What are the countries we're interested in increasing our visibility, our the students coming in, the pipeline of students coming in, and using that to target, and also subjects, right? Which subjects are we interested in being the key leaders in? So that's kind of the obvious, but again, following up on what we said before, if a professor can give a better class or an equal or better class via MOOC and run it with, by the way, I didn't mention this, but not in a private label, not in a closed site. So they're taking the course with everybody else in the world, which for us, we find there's value in that they get exposed to not just their own opinions, but they see more of the world. They're doing it in English, which isn't the language that most Israelis study in. So obviously that has value also in itself. And so we want the intro courses, right? We're looking at the intro courses. If we're going to do them, it's obviously going to be in Hebrew.
Okay, thanks, Nadav. I've got one more question for each of the panelists, and I'm going to put you right to the wire on this one. Try to be very succinct so that we have time for 20 minutes or so for questions and answers with the audience. So, Mike, in terms of costs, based on what you've learned so far from a considerable MOOC experience, have you got any tips for people here in the audience in terms of the cost-quality-time trade-off?
Quality, quality, quality. Don't ever stop with that thought in your mind. We generally think that there's no benefit by shortchanging the quality of the courses that we put out there. For many reasons, as you might guess. You're out there, tens and thousands and 60,000 people looking at you, and some of those people are doing everything they can do to find a problem in what it is you put out there. And the media jumps on that stuff very quickly. Second, it's our brand, it's our name that's out there. And we don't want, I can have a goofball professor at Georgia Tech. We don't have any, but teach 30 students and they all grumble and grouse about this professor, but that's as far as it gets in general. I know there's some websites nowadays that allow that to get out further, but if I have a bumbling professor, male or female, on a MOOC, that's going to kill you. But also for engagement, for proper delivery of content, for all of that increases the cost over class development for a regular classroom. And we recognize that, and we accept that, and we know how much it's going to cost, and we try to do everything as professionally as we possibly can, and just say that's what we're going to do. That's why we don't have 200 classes out there right now, because we just don't have enough money to do that. And so within the budgets that we have, we try to always strive to produce the highest quality courses we possibly can. It benefits the external environment, and it benefits our students. That's where we're getting the wins with our students, is the quality of the content is significantly better. We have a 9-section electronic circuits course that we have where we had inconsistency of instruction. We MOOCed the content of that course, and we did the quantitative analysis of the results of that course, consistent across it. That's a win. And that's because of the quality of the production of the content.
That's great, thank you, Mike. Jennifer, last one for you. How would you assess the current trade-off of costs and benefits from the MOOCs you've delivered at University of Alberta to date?
Well, as we discussed, this panel is focused on ROI, but for the University of Alberta, student engagement and that positive experience towards amplifying our reputation and reach to rural Alberta, Canadian and international cohorts, as well as to a diverse cohort that was not just male, highly educated and wealthy, were critical factors in how we assessed Dino 101. You can see more on those results in the poster right outside the room here. But assessing from an ROI, where we define return only by monetary value, I'm going to give you how we did this. So there's two ways of looking at your costs. You have full course costs, or you have external course costs only. So internal course costs are the costs spent on your own staff and students and internal cost units. In our case, for version 1.0 of Dino, 85% of what we did was spent internally and 15% external. And you have two ways of looking at your revenue. Total revenues, including on-campus tuition for course variants, where you've created a new course, and incremental revenues only, which would include only the Coursera student tuition and those other streams that I talked to you about. So then you take those two factors. When you add the estimated value of digital marketing to the net benefit position, you get 4 possible answers. And that's just the truth. There's 4 ways of looking at this, depending how you'd like to interpret it. At the most conservative, you could say, well, I missed by about 32% if I'm just looking at incremental revenues compared against full course costs. So I spent money and I was short 32%. But if I look at total revenues compared against full course costs, I gained 6%. 6% gain. So kind of a break-even point, really. If I look at incremental revenues, so the smaller revenue pie compared against external only costs, that's a gain of 52%. And if I look at total revenues compared against external only costs, so those are costs that went outside the university. The rest of the costs recirculated around in our complex budgeting systems. Okay, so it's real. It's not, I'm not a prophet up here. This is a way you can look at it. That's a 91% gain that we've made in one course version once. So I'm not even talking about amortization yet. So it's real. You can do this. You can also use the calculated cost per student as a metric of value. In our case, Dino 101 is repeatable 2 to 3 times per year with additional ongoing minimal costs and revisions. Now, we're not able yet to predict a steady state of new course costs per course repetition, but it is evident that the more students take the course, the more cost efficient the course becomes over time, even with planned revision costs. So based on the University of Alberta's early success in the medium in achieving significant positive return on investment in terms of reputation and reach, as we discussed, Plus, when we look at the estimated value of the digital marketing that we did, we in our university have recommended that we capitalize on this advantage and we continue building high quality, highly engaging MOOCs as part of our overall digital learning strategy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Nadav, last question for you, and then we'll open up the floor to the audience. So what do you see as key to Tel Aviv University in terms of placing a sustainable MOOC strategy in place?
So I'm going to start with answering that and then just another comment. As a sustainable MOOC strategy, we're looking at probably making in revenue between $5,000 and $10,000, I would say, per session. Right? You run that enough times, you get a reasonable return. You can break even. I think there's also the question which you kind of hinted to of what are we looking to break even or are we looking to gain money? That's another question that the strategic that we should ask strategically. Is this something what are our goals within this? But if we look at a number, that's probably with the average course cost in Coursera, and this is a real number, in Coursera, not for Tel Aviv University, but in Coursera, the average is around $50,000 per course. So if it's costing $50,000, you want to make some sort of return on that. I would also argue that the ability to save in the process, to have a very efficient production process, which I don't think most universities have today. And if you want, we can talk about it later. But that's also something that will save you a lot of money and thus make you more efficient and generate more revenue.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Nadav. I think Tom wants to come back on because I'll give you the luxury of a comeback on that.
Quick comment. I want to come back to a slide that Mike had and amplify that, which is his slide was like, don't rely on Coursera to help you make revenue, and I'm not amplifying that because I'm trying to skirt some sort of responsibility here. But the point is, I think what they've all shown is how they've taken what they've done on Coursera and amplified it. And there's been a number of those examples either here or throughout the conference of folks that have used the courses that they've produced and then amplified it on campus where they've flipped it and turned it into a blended environment, where they've used this to give credit for students, where they've used this in digital marketing and distribution. So I think there's a number of ways in which we are actively trying to produce revenue as Coursera for all of you. I think credentials is a very large market for us, which is what I was talking about earlier. But there are a number of ways that I think each of our partners are amplifying what they're producing on Coursera in ways that are very unique to what they can do and not what we can actually do.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Tom. We've got a roving mic. We've got two mics up here, and there's one roving there. And I'm going to open the floor now to questions, so please raise your hand and let me see one right at the back. Thank you very much. The mic's on its way.
Oh, I'm sitting right here.
We'll come back to you in a second.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your comments this morning. Michael, I have a question. What is your university thinking in terms of partnerships as a strategy to reduce costs and add influence in this new market, particularly around specialized certificates and capstone projects? Have you given thought to partnerships with other institutions of higher education?
Is this mic?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we have talked to several institutions, our peer group, maybe the way to say it, about things we can put together. For example, I know one of our MOOC instructors is working with Vanderbilt on putting together a kind of a collective certificate or in Coursera terminology, specialization program in health IT. So those partnerships are building. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but the University System of Georgia is involved in this, what do they call it, System of Systems group that has multiple university systems across multiple states, looking at how they can share content that they're developing across these multiple systems, so that even elevates it up to a higher level. So definitely we're looking at, talking to, and working with other people.
Yeah.
Did I answer that?
I'm going to also answer that with your permission. We asked actually Coursera to have a shidduch agency, a matchmaking agency for courses for the specializations, right? So specialization courses will generate up to 4 times in revenue per course, per single course, right? Because the specialization is considered by the students to or as a higher level of certificate, and therefore we have an interest in being in as many or as part of as many certificates or specialization tracks as possible. Having said that, we're not totally sure we want to create 4 courses in biblical archaeology, which apparently we're the best school for in the world, because it's a very specialized, it's a very narrow subject. We would very much be interested, and this is like an open call to anybody that's interested, to partner with other universities in strengths, their strengths and stuff that we are also strong in. So, come see me later, at least, if you're interested.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll open to further questions. Is there anybody who would like to drill the panel? Yeah.
Where's the balance? Like, how do you strike where you push the merchandise and the donation options with students? Like on our first course, in our landing page, after the post-course survey, if they engage a little bit, a couple more clicks, they get to a page to make a donation to our school's annual fund, because we didn't want to put it right up front. But is it okay to contact the students within the course and have a donate to support future courses button near the top of things? What's your attitude of how that compares to the free education concept?
Who's we?
I'll take that.
Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia.
So what's interesting is we didn't actually build our fine art print store and our t-shirt shop until the students in the forums demanded it. So we watched the demand grow, and then we met the demand. And for donations, similar. Folks were saying, we want more paleo courses. How do we help that happen? And so in our case, we couldn't do that, donate through Coursera as a Canadian institution that's a not-for-profit itself. As a university, there's a very specific prescribed process for that in our province. So it had to go through our Office of Advancement, but they were delighted to work with us to create an account so that the donations could go right to the paleo program. Previously, they had just been to the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences, so we narrowed it. So we watched the demand create, and we have it right there on the Coursera pages. We built a tab for support us, right, support the course, and that's where they can go and find all the stores. And then we also have it on our U Alberta pages. And you'll find that when you utilize those third-party stores, people who are interested in whatever that subject matter is are going to come buy the things as well. And then, oh, there's a course about that? Well, isn't that interesting? So you start to get a reverse marketing effect.
Okay, thank you. Just at the front here. Sorry, he did have his hand up earlier. Yeah.
The world demographics is such that there is a lot of young people around. Maybe some countries are saturated with their young people. But the critical thing will be for these people to have a magic piece of paper, which we call a diploma. One MOOC center may not be able to do it, so Coursera may be a good platform to bring partners together for when you collect these pieces of diplomas. But there I see the testing and the assessment is going to be very critical. So, in fact, I had a specific question also. Is your platform for assessing available to others with cost or free or with some participation fee. So I think really the critical thing in many countries will be to get a diploma. There will be always people who are in their 40s, 50s who want to learn an interesting subject, and there may be an interesting market for that also. But for the piece of diploma, I think the bottleneck will be the platform that will test beyond peer reviews as well as beyond multiple choices. So I will talk to you at the coffee break for what your platform can do, but that will be, I think, a very important issue for many countries.
It is very important, and for the nation of Canada and the province of Alberta, we have very specific student privacy data laws that do not allow student grade data to be stored on US servers. So that was also a very important reason as to why we needed to build an online flexible testing tool that resides on servers in Alberta so that we could abide by our province's security data laws. And I'm sure there are other countries represented here in this room who have similar needs as we did. Happy to talk further.
Thank you. Gentleman there in the second row.
I'm Phil Ganderton from the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of New Mexico, and I'm wondering how you have dealt with compensating faculty in your revenue models, and in particular, is there any suggestion that you might compensate them within their existing workloads?
So I can answer that for Georgia Tech. We compensate the faculty. In the online master's program, the compensation model is different than the other MOOC classes. In the online master's program, it is extra compensation as well as workload reduction. In the regular MOOC process, we give them discretionary money that they can use to buy out part of their summer with, or hire TAs or art research assistants, or buy equipment, anything but have a party. And so we have two different models for those two, but that's the way we've approached it, and so far it's been successful. You will also find, since we're an institute level, we're funding at the institute level, you'll find that at the school level or department, that their chairs are often giving them a little bit of buyout help as well. But that's up to their departments to do that.
Similar. In Tel Aviv, the specific question, so do they get exempt from teaching hours? So once they created the course, if they're giving it year after year after year, and they're giving the same course, they don't really need to buy out of the teaching hours, right? They don't need to get exempt from them because they don't really have to show up for class. So they have a TA that will deal with the students, or with most of the engagement with the students. They have to make sure that the exam is written every year, a new exam, and properly that covers the material. But there's no need to compensate or to change that time with something. We have compensated our professors individually in a different way. The numbers, I would imagine, vary according to country, according to institution, according to all of that. So I don't know how helpful they will be, and I don't know if I'm actually allowed to speak of them. So I'll try and refrain from that. But we also assisted, or some of the professors we actually have come up to us and said, we don't need more money. We're getting compensated enough, but we would like scholarships for our people. Which is, in kind, which was an answer that the university very much appreciated to hear, because you can give more scholarships to existing students, and the professor doesn't want anything for himself.
And from Alberta, what we're doing with MOOCs is part of our pilot program, right? So in those cases, we have provided some course relief funding. We're also providing funding to different professors who want to research the effects of what we're doing. So, for instance, out there is the marketing research that really comes from my shop, but then we have 2 faculty of education professors who will be publishing in top-tier journals, again, in the year cycle as they go through, on results of the course as well. So we offer funding both on the research side and to the professor. On the TA side, it's interesting because do you consider that to be now a newly expanded set of activities for your doctoral student or your graduate student, or is this something to top up? And so we kind of drew a line between when you're in the forums participating with the students is just like if you'd be in the classroom participating with the students, but if you're helping us write the scripts that we are going to be producing, then there is additional payment that you receive for that. So just like anything, there's a startup cost when you go into the production of one of these, but you don't do that every time. You just do whatever percentage is acceptable to you based on either your net promoter score or whatever your metric is of do we need to do revisions or not, and you continue to fund that way. It is more of an issue with blended. So just like many universities, our other stream of work is in the blended courses, and those are the professors that are asking, so what do I get for spending the time to doing this in blended? But with MOOC, it's so clear that there is a bit of compensation there, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm probably going to take 2 more questions. We have a break coming up, but we can overrun a little bit if people want to answer. There was a lady at the back, and then I'll come through to you afterwards. Lady right at the back.
Elizabeth Meyer, University of California, San Diego. Michael, I have a follow-on question for you. I believe you mentioned that you have donors that have supported this experiment, the grand experiment. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about those donors and how you differentiate this from the other kinds of activities for Georgia Tech.
The other kind of what?
Donor activities.
Donor activities.
Yeah.
Oh, there are. I hate to give an individual credit for this, but Bill Gates' interest in higher education and changing higher education has probably stimulated people to think about what can I do to improve education. And so we are finding donors that maybe historically would support a research program or support a chair for a professor, things like that, are saying, I want to support innovation in higher education. What can I do? And so we're getting these donors, obviously they're not walking in the door with a big check, but they're essentially coming to us saying, what can we do to improve education and how do we go about that? So are they different people? In some cases, yeah. Are they the same population? In some cases, yes. Who are deciding that how do I influence? How do I support the kind of things we're trying to do at C21U and at Georgia Tech? And what can I do to improve education? So it's a new world because historically, you saw very little direct donations to support innovation in education. You saw scholarship money, and you saw dorms being named for a donor and things like that. But in this case, they're saying, I want to help change education, maybe is the way to say it, or improve it or whatever, and they're trying to do everything they can. And it's exciting to talk to these people.
Okay, thanks. Where's my mic gone?
Yeah, the mic.
Where's
the mic?
Of us up here, but we want one down there.
There, come up here.
There we go.
She's hiding back there.
Thought we'd gone, yeah.
Thank you. Me, Nuna from World Economic Forum. Question is basically whoever wants to pick it up. Would you be interested having other universities in Coursera system administering examinations for your classes and then providing credits and potentially sharing revenue for administrating writing?
I can take that.
So one of the ways to look at it is the bricks and mortar transfer agreements that are already in place. So for instance, in Canada, which is a smaller system, obviously, than the United States, we have quite a number of bricks and mortar transfer agreements where if you take courses at one university and now you want to transfer into the University of Alberta, we already have agreements in place to accept those credits. The piece of cultural work that needs to be done on the bureaucratic side is, and do we do this with each other's online learning? And how do we do it? And so I'm actually quite excited. I see a colleague from UBC here, and I don't know if you have T's in the room. Toronto in the house? Not in the house, that's okay. Oh, she's giving a talk. She's excused. But, we've already started to chat a little bit about that because for us, we're the big three in the nation, right? And there's tremendous opportunity for us. I don't know if other countries have already been set up in the same way with the bricks and mortar transfer agreements, but really we just need to work with our provincial governments and the national government and redefine the terms a bit, and then we would be able to do that because we have a great belief in, at least within the Canadian borders, of the equality of the professoriate at our top research universities.
Also, you asked the question and it can be answered two different ways. She answered it in a sense of transfer credits and things like that. The other way to answer that question is we develop a course, for example, and your university licenses that course and produces its own certification process or exam process and uses the content. And so they award credit at their university as if it was their course, but at a significantly lower cost. That doesn't impact us. It impacts them. They decide whether or not to use that. That is starting to happen. I'm getting inquiries about licensing our content to be used in courses at another university, and they want to be able to do that. That's a much simpler process. The licensing stuff is complicated, but from a transfer credit or accreditation standpoint, that's much simpler. The transfer credit question, as you mentioned, gets complicated because how is it different with the online courses versus the normal courses? All these things come up, accreditors get in the way, and it just gives me headaches. But everybody has articulation agreements, and if somebody came to Georgia Tech and took a course at Cal Berkeley or at Stanford or MIT or something, we'd look at it, but we'd accept it for credit, obviously. Obviously, I should be careful when I say that, but probably. And so, there's two ways to look at that. The simpler way is for somebody to essentially adopt our course and use it.
We actually had, I would say, collectively around 10 exchange students. So students that have, maybe even from universities that are sitting in the room, that have taken the course in Tel Aviv University, taken it in MOOC format. They were registered that semester as exchange students in Israel, living in Israel. It gave them more time, I'm guessing, to walk around Tel Aviv. But in the evenings they studied hard. So when they did get credit at the end of the semester, and that credit didn't say that it was a MOOC course. It said it was the same course because, again, we view it as equivalent or higher in demands and levels of the course. So we've already had that. I think strategically, university-wise, we're probably between 1.5 to 2 years from starting some sort of process where what you suggested exists, where universities become some sort of proctoring. There's some sort of proctor exchange, and there's probably also a market there.
Okay, thanks very much. We now have a network period as well as an early lunch, so I'm certainly not going to keep you any longer from that. I think you'll, I'm sure, agree with me that we've had an excellent panel discussion here and really some excellent engagement on the topic, and given you hopefully plenty of food for thought and no doubt lots of questions that you might engage later in the day. So please join with me and thank the panel.